Hey guys, tonight we begin not with glory, not with shining armor or heroic trumpets, but with mud. Thick, sticky mud that clings to your ankles like an overly affectionate swamp. Because before anyone gets to Jerusalem, before anyone even sees a desert, the story of the Crusades begins right here in your tiny medieval village, which, by the way, has fewer buildings than modern people have kitchen appliances. The year is somewhere around 1095. Dates aren't your strong suit, but you've heard whispers. A sermon has been given, a very loud, very sweaty sermon. A man in robes shouted at you, and 100 other confused villagers about sin, salvation, and how God apparently really cares about who controls Jerusalem. You nodded along, mostly because everyone else did, and because the priest made very aggressive eye contact when he mentioned eternal damnation. Now, you're not entirely sure where Jerusalem is. The map in your head goes something like France, and some forests and dragons, then Jerusalem. But the priest promised that if you join this holy cause, all your sins are wiped away. Gone, vanished, clean slate. Which is fantastic news, considering what you did last spring behind the mill house. You thought God didn't notice, but apparently he has receipts, and he's not afraid to use them. Also, let's be honest, you're bored. You've plowed the same field for 14 years. Your daily menu is barley, onions, and regret. Your entertainment is watching sheep blink. The most exciting thing that's happened to you lately was when Gerald fell in the latrine and came out swearing in what he thought was Latin. Eternal glory sounds better than that. Eternal glory sounds better than anything here. So you sign up. Or rather, you get roped in. One evening in the tavern, after 3 mugs of weak ale that tastes like sadness in liquid form, you're suddenly making a holy vow to reclaim the Holy Land. One moment you're nodding politely at a knight telling a story about valor. The next you're clutching a wooden cross, half drunk, and agreeing to walk thousands of miles for God. You wake up the next morning hungover, barefoot, and holding someone else's boots. Still, you feel oddly proud. Congratulations, you're officially a crusader. The church gives you a blessing. A priest sprinkles water on your head while mumbling something that might be Latin, or might just be his grocery list. You get a patch sewn onto your tunic, a red cross. It's crooked. The stitching looks like it was done by a goat, and the dye is already running in the rain. But it's a cross, and that makes you special. You were promised armor, noble, shining, knightly armor that would make you look like a legend in the making. What you get is a hand-me-down chainmail shirt that smells like sadness. It's rusty, sweaty, and has the same general vibe as a damp dog. Putting it on feels like hugging a depressed Andal. It's also incredibly heavy. Forget running into battle. You're struggling to stand up straight without dislocating your spine. Your helmet? A dented iron cone that clearly wasn't designed by anyone who had ever met a human head. It wobbles, it pinches, and it makes you look like a turnip cosplaying as a knight. There's no padding inside, so every time you move, it gently scrapes your skull like medieval exfoliation. For leg protection, you get wool. Just wool. Not even good wool. You wrap your legs like a sad Christmas present and hope it keeps the rocks from permanently tattooing your shins. Footwear? Forget sturdy boots. You've got thin leather turn shoes, basically medieval slippers. Within the first mile, your feet will feel like they've been tenderized by God himself. By nightfall, you'll have blisters large enough to apply for church membership. And finally, your surcoat. It's supposed to be bright white with a bold red cross, a proud symbol of holy purpose. In reality, it's beige, stained with something suspicious, and flaps in the wind like a wet bedsheet. You take a long look at yourself. Do you look like a knight? No. You look like a scared turnip wrapped in rust. But it's too late now. You're packed, dressed, and destined for Jerusalem. You've been told to bring what you can. So naturally, you pack a kitchen knife, a frying pan, and 3 onions. That's it. That's your survival kit for a multi-year journey across continents. Gerald, your neighbor, has brought a rake. He calls it God's Claw. He's also shirtless, because apparently, he thinks intimidation works better without fabric. Your family asks if God will be feeding you along the way. You laugh. You shouldn't have, because the answer is no, he will not. Your pack feels heavier with each step. It's not just the chainmail or the frying pan clanging against your thigh. It's the creeping realization that you're part of one of the least organized, most poorly planned mass movements in human history. Thousands of peasants, poorly armed, barely fed, and led by nobles who think logistics is a type of cheese. But hey, at least you'll have eternal glory, assuming you don't trip over your own shoes and die before you even leave the village. Trumpets sound. Or maybe it's just Gerald yelling into a bucket. Either way, the crusade is moving. You shuffle along with hundreds of other equally confused villagers, goats, carts, and at least one man dragging what suspiciously looks like a piano. The road out of the village is chaos. Some march in ranks, others wander off into beet fields. Someone insists on singing hymns in a key that doesn't exist. A nobleman rides past on horseback, shouting something inspiring like, "Forward, men," before immediately galloping away to somewhere less muddy. Within the first mile, you regret everything. Your chainmail is digging into your neck. Your surcoat is sticking to your skin like guilt. Your boots are already plotting your assassination. And you haven't even reached the next village. The noise is relentless. People arguing, praying, coughing, and farting in a perfect medieval symphony. A child cries. A goat screams. Someone sneezes behind you. And you immediately assume death is imminent. Welcome to your new life. Day 1, you're hungry. Day 2, you're hungrier. Day 3, your stomach is writing hymns for food. The army does technically have supplies. Moldy bread the texture of granite. Salted meat that may or may not have started a second career as leather. And peas. Always peas. Dry, hard, joyless peas. You try chewing them and realize your teeth are outmatched. Breakfast is usually black bread, so dense it could be used as a catapult projectile. Lunch doesn't exist. Dinner is stew. Glorious, mysterious stew. Nobody knows what's in it. Everyone eats it anyway. Some say it's rabbit. Others swear it's boot leather. You don't ask questions. One night, Gerald proudly produces a fish he's been carrying in his sock. He offers to share. You politely decline and begin fasting for spiritual clarity, mostly because the smell of sockfish makes you want to reconsider Christianity altogether. By the time the sun sets, you've walked maybe 12 miles, but it feels like 12 years. You collapse in a field next to strangers who smell like regret. The ground is hard, damp, and unforgiving. Someone snores so loudly, it sounds like a blacksmith trapped inside a barrel. You sleep badly, but at least you sleep. Tomorrow will be worse. Tomorrow, there will be rain. Tomorrow, your boots will transform from mild torture into ongoing war crime. Tomorrow, you will discover the true meaning of chafing. But for now, you're a crusader. You're dirty, poorly equipped, malnourished, and already second-guessing your life choices. But you're also part of something bigger than yourself. A holy mission. A divine purpose. A continental road trip from which you will definitely not return the same person, assuming you return at all. Welcome to the Crusades. The trumpets, Or maybe just a man who's been handed a funnel and way too much enthusiasm. Sound again the next morning. Your eyes open reluctantly, your body begging for another hour of sleep, or better yet, another life altogether. But the road east doesn't wait, and apparently neither does God. You haul yourself upright, shake the snoring Gerald awake. He's drooling on his rake again, enjoying the slow-moving river of humanity shuffling out of the field. It's official. The crusade has begun. By mile 2, you realize you have made a grave miscalculation. Your shoes, if they can be called that, are little more than leather suggestions. They were never designed for long marches across Europe. They were designed for standing in mud, poking at sheep, and occasionally stepping over puddles. Now, after less than an hour on the road, your feet feel like they're being slow roasted by invisible demons. Blisters, that's the word. Giant, ambitious blisters that seem to have set up a small village of their own across your heels. You consider naming them. By mile 3, one of them is running for local office. Gerald, naturally, is barefoot. He claims it makes him faster. Faster to develop tetanus, maybe. His toes are already bleeding, but he insists it's a sign of holiness. You nod politely, mostly because you don't have the energy to argue. Around mid-morning, hunger strikes again. You paw through your bag and produce half an onion, a piece of bread so dense it could double as siege weaponry, and some peas. Dry peas. You shake them around in your hand like dice, hoping they'll magically turn into something edible. They don't. Nearby, a man is chewing on salted pork. At least you think it's pork. The color suggests it might also be brick. Another crusader proudly holds up a lump of cheese, so hard it could be used to deflect arrows. He offers to share. You decline, mostly because you like your teeth where they are. Water is another matter. There's plenty of it in rivers and streams. Sure, but whether it's drinkable is an entirely different question. You refill your flask from a stream that looks suspiciously like it as doubling as a horse's personal bathtub. You drink it anyway. Hydration is hydration. If you die from it, at least it'll be quick. After a few more miles, you start noticing just how absurd everyone looks. You thought you were badly equipped. Turns out, you're in good company. One man has tied a pot to his head and calls it a helmet. Another is swinging what looks like a broom handle with a butter knife tied to the end. Someone else has strapped chicken feathers to his shoulders and insists it will help him fly at the enemy. He has yet to take more than 5 steps without tripping over his own fantasy. And then there's Gerald. Shirtless, barefoot, carrying a rake with the words Jesus. Watch this carved into the handle in something that might be Latin, or might just be squiggly nonsense. If the Muslims don't kill him, irony surely will. The noblemen, of course, look better. They're on horseback, draped in colorful cloaks, shiny armor, and smug expressions. They yell encouraging things like, "Be strong, men," before immediately galloping off to somewhere with shade. Meanwhile, you're sweating so hard your surcoat could be wrung out like a towel. And then, just as you think you're adjusting, the skies open. Rain pours down with biblical enthusiasm, soaking everything you own in under 30 seconds. Your surcoat clings to you like guilt. Your boots squelch with each step. Gerald's rake is now dangerously slippery, which he declares makes it more powerful. The road transforms into mud. Not just regular mud, medieval mud. Thick, sticky, wheel-sucking mud. It smells like every farm animal you've ever met had a family reunion in a puddle. Carts get stuck. Goats refuse to move. A man loses his shoe in the muck and has to fish it out with his bare hand, only to discover he's holding someone else's shoe, which is worse. You slip twice, once forward, once backward. The goat laughs. By nightfall, You're less of a crusader and more of a drowned rat with aspirations. That night, the army sets up camp in a damp meadow. Camp is a generous word. In reality, it's a field full of exhausted peasants collapsing wherever they happen to fall. Some light fires. Others just curl up under carts. Gerald curls up on top of his rake, like it's a holy pillow. You lie down in the wet grass, wrapped in a wool blanket that now weighs twice as much thanks to the rain. The man next to you snores like a war horn. Someone coughs behind you, the ominous, juicy kind of cough, and you silently write your will to God. You sleep badly, but you do sleep. When you wake up, your blanket is half frozen, your bread is soggy, and you're pretty sure a family of frogs has moved into your boots. Still, the march continues. By day 4, the smell hits. It's not any one person. It's everyone. Thousands of unwashed bodies moving together in the heat, sweating into wool, leather, and chainmail. Hygiene, once a noble concept, has been completely abandoned. Bathing? Impossible. Soap? A myth. You're all fermenting together like one big human cheese wheel. Your undergarments have fused to your skin in places you'd rather not think about. Lice have joined the party. You name them. You try to negotiate with them. They are winning. Someone suggests washing in a river. You wander down, hopeful, only to discover the water is freezing, filthy, and currently being used by 3 men to soak the mysterious wounds. You nod respectfully and return to camp dirtier than ever. At night, scratching becomes the unofficial rhythm of the crusade. Scratch, shuffle, groan. Gerald insists his lice are holy companions. You throw a pebble at him. And then the coughing spreads. At first, it's just one man hacking into his sleeve. Then it's 10. Then it's half the camp. Fevers, chills, swollen glands, medieval medicine's greatest hits. The healers try their best. They apply leeches, chant prayers, wave herbs under noses. Nothing helps. People either recover on their own, or they don't. Gerald develops a mysterious rash on his neck, insists it's a sign of divine favor, and starts showing it off to strangers. You start planning his funeral. The priests say it's a test from God. The nobles say it's the devil. The barmaid who inexplicably joined the march says it's because no one washes their hands. She is immediately ignored. Despite the misery, people find ways to entertain themselves. Some sing hymns badly. Some gamble with pebbles. A group of knights tries jousting with broom handles until someone loses a tooth. Gerald starts a contest to see who can balance the most onions on their head. He wins because no one else cares. At night, stories circulate around the fires. Tales of Jerusalem. Golden towers, rivers of wine, endless feasts. You know it's all nonsense, but you cling to it anyway. Anything is better than another bowl of mystery stew. It's been a week, maybe 2. Time has lost all meaning. Your body hurts in places you didn't know existed. Your feet are a battlefield. Your armor is a prison. Your stomach is a hollow cave echoing with complaints. And the worst part? You're still in Europe. Jerusalem is thousands of miles away, across mountains, rivers, deserts, and armies that actually know what they're doing. You, on the other hand, are armed with a frying pan and a bad attitude. But it's too late to turn back now. You've sworn an oath. You've been blessed by the church. And besides, Gerald would never let you live it down. So you march on, one squelching, blistering step at a time. Welcome to the road to Jerusalem. You're only at the beginning, and already you're questioning every decision you've ever made. By now, you've been on the road for what feels like months, though in reality, it's been maybe 3 weeks. Time has become slippery. Every day blends into the next, a repetitive cycle of blisters, bad stew, and Gerald yelling something about destiny while brandishing his rake like it's Excalibur. You thought the hardest part of this crusade would be the battles. You imagined glorious clashes with enemy knights, dramatic duels in the desert, your name sung in taverns for centuries. Instead, the true enemy has revealed itself. Disease, donkeys, and disasters of every possible kind. It begins quietly, with one man coughing. You don't pay much attention. People cough all the time. Smoke, dust, stew that fought back too hard. But within a week, it's everywhere. Coughs echo like drums across the camp. Wheezing becomes the background music of your life. Fever follows, and chills. Then, for some unlucky souls, swelling that makes them look like they've been cursed by a particularly angry wizard. Tents quickly transform into makeshift infirmaries, which is to say, damp canvas filled with miserable people slowly leaking onto straw. The healers are overwhelmed. Their methods are creative. Bleeding, of course. Always bleeding. Got a cough? Let's drain a pint of your blood. Rash on your neck? Another pint. Headache? Clearly, the blood is at fault. You start avoiding the healers entirely, deciding you'd rather die naturally than be drained like a medieval wineskin. Herbs are another popular cure. A woman wades burning sage under your nose until your eyes water. A man rubs garlic on Gerald's rash. Gerald declares himself healed and starts eating the garlic. The rash remains. Meanwhile, rumors spread faster than the sickness itself. Some say it's God's punishment for the army's sins. Others say it's the devil testing your resolve. One man insists it's caused by sleeping too close to goats. Another swears it comes from looking at the moon too long. You nod at all of them, mostly because arguing requires energy you no longer have. And hygiene? Forget it. The entire crusading force smells like a damp barn that's been left in the sun. Lice infestations are so common that scratching has become the unofficial marching rhythm. Scratch, scratch, shuffle, groan. You thought horses were the main animal of the crusade. Noble steeds carrying knights into glory, banners flying. Wrong. The real MVPs of this journey are donkeys. Thousands of them, braying constantly, dragging carts, carrying supplies, or simply refusing to move at the worst possible moments. Donkeys are stubborn. Infinitely stubborn. One stops in the middle of the road, and no amount of shouting, shoving, or praying will get it to budge. The entire column halts, while a dozen men argue with one donkey, who looks smug about the whole situation. Your group alone has at least 6. Gerald has attached bells to one, and calls it Saint Hoof. Another has developed the charming habit of biting people when they least expect it. You have a permanent bruise on your arm as proof. And then there are the accidents. Donkeys trip, donkeys kick. Donkeys relieve themselves with nuclear enthusiasm in the middle of camp. One night, a cart tips over, scattering onions across the mud. A riot nearly breaks out as hungry crusaders dive for them. The donkeys, naturally, eat most of the onions themselves. If the rain was bad before, it has now upgraded to personal vendetta. Entire days are spent marching through relentless downpours that turn the road into a soup of mud, manure, and regret. Your surcoat clings like a second, wetter skin. Your boots slosh with every step. The chainmail rusts before your eyes. You swear it's getting heavier by the hour. And then, just when you begin to dream of fire and warmth, the weather changes. The rain stops. The clouds part. The sun emerges like a smug overseer. Within minutes, you're roasting. Your wool tunic transforms into a medieval sauna. Sweat pours down your back. The smell in camp reaches biblical proportions. Gerald declares the sudden heat is a sign from God. A man collapses face first into the dust. You start to wonder if God is just messing with you for fun. Supplies are dwindling. What little bread remains is moldy. The cheese has evolved into a new life form, and the salted meat has fused into one solid brick at the bottom of a barrel. Rations are handed out unevenly. Nobles eat first, peasants last. Gerald eats whenever he feels like it, usually loudly, usually onions. You catch him gnawing on raw barley once. He insists it's delicious. You try a handful. It tastes like horse feed, which, technically, it is. Foraging becomes a necessity. Berries, nuts, whatever roots you can dig up. Someone swears they saw a fig tree. It turns out to be a scarecrow. Another man proudly presents mushrooms he found in the woods. He eats them. He spends the next 12 hours behind a bush, reconsidering his life choices. Stew continues to be the main evening meal. Always stew. Always mysterious. You find something chewy in your bowl. You don't ask. No one ever asks. The crusade is, if nothing else, a parade of disasters. Carts break down constantly. Wheels snap. Axles crack. Entire families end up sitting in the mud, staring at their ruined wagon, while others shuffle past, pretending not to notice. One nobleman attempts to cross a river on horseback, only to discover the horse cannot swim. He barely makes it back, dripping wet, while the horse paddles itself to the opposite bank and refuses to return. The nobleman spends the next week sulking on foot. Children wander off. Goats escape. Tents collapse in the wind. Fires spread too quickly. Every day brings a new calamity, a new reason to question whether anyone thought this whole crusade idea through. Spoiler, they didn't. At first, you thought villages along the way might welcome you. After all, you're holy warriors marching in the name of God. Surely they'll be honored to host you. In reality, the locals look at you the way a farmer looks at locusts. Suspicious, fearful, and very eager for you to move along quickly. To them, you're not a holy army. You're thousands of unwashed strangers trampling their crops, drinking their ale, and stealing their chickens. Some villages lock their gates as soon as you appear. Others demand outrageous prices for food and water. One town charges half a chicken just to use the well. Another insists on 3 silver coins for a loaf of bread that could double as building material. Sometimes things turn violent. Hungry crusaders raid a farm. The farmers fight back. Fists fly. Pitchforks are raised. You find yourself dodging cabbages being hurled with surprising accuracy. By the end, everyone is bruised, muddy, and slightly ashamed. The march becomes routine. Wake up sore. Walk until your legs feel like wood. Eat something unidentifiable. Sleep poorly. And yet, somehow, you keep moving. So does everyone else. The human capacity for stubbornness is astonishing. Maybe it's faith. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's just that going home means admitting you made a terrible mistake. You catch yourself muttering prayers you never cared about before. You promise God you'll be good if he just keeps you alive another day. You even stop swearing at Gerald when he wakes you up at night to ask if you think rakes are holier than swords. One evening, as the sun sets over yet another damp meadow, a knight on horseback rides past. His armor gleams, his horse is magnificent, and his banner flaps proudly in the wind. For a moment, you remember why you came. Glory, honor, eternal salvation. And then his squire drops a chamber pot directly onto the road, splattering half the column. Reality sets back in. You're filthy. You're sick. You're hungry. Your feet hate you. And you still have thousands of miles to go. But you keep walking. Because what else can you do? Welcome to the Crusades. where the biggest battles aren't against enemies with swords. They're against hunger, mud, and your own rapidly disintegrating willpower. By now, you've accepted that the Crusade isn't so much a glorious march to Jerusalem as it is the world's longest, most chaotic camping trip. You've trudged through endless mud, survived on stew that legally qualifies as a weapon, and discovered that donkeys can, in fact, hold grudges. And now comes the part of the journey where Europe itself seems to rise up against you. Rivers, mountains, suspicious villagers, toll collectors with unusually sharp teeth. Each day presents some fresh humiliation. In your village, the idea of borders was simple. The edge of Farmer Thomas's field, the spot where the woods get too creepy, the river you never bother crossing because you can't swim. Out here, borders mean something else entirely. Every time you cross into a new lord's domain, you're forced to stop. Some herald appears, all dressed up in feathers and smugness, demanding a toll. Always a toll. A toll for using the road, a toll for breathing the air, a toll for the privilege of passing through land you wouldn't even camp on willingly. The lords themselves sometimes ride out to inspect you. They look down from fine horses at your ragged group, noses wrinkled, as if they can smell Gerald from 3 fields away. After a long silence, they usually mutter something like, "Try not to steal anything," then vanish back to their castles. Once, a local baron tries to charge you a toll in cheese. Specifically, 10 wheels of cheese. No one has 10 wheels of cheese. The closest thing is Gerald, who claims he once saw 10 wheels of cheese, and therefore, technically, owns them in spirit. The baron does not find this persuasive. The army ends up handing over a wagon load of rusty pots instead. The baron looks at them like you've offered him a bucket of manure, which, to be fair, you probably could have. If you had known how many rivers stood between you and Jerusalem, you might have stayed home. Crossing a river with a crusading army is like watching a badly organized festival, except wetter and louder. First, everyone argues about the best crossing point. Some swear the shallows are to the north. Others insist the bridge to the south is safer. In the end, the leaders usually just shout until everyone gives up and starts wading in at random spots. The results are predictable. Knights in armor sink like decorative stones. Peasants cling to bundles of possessions, shrieking as the current tears them away. Donkeys refuse to enter the water, then suddenly leap in when no one's looking. Gerald invents a system involving barrels tied together, declares himself an engineer, and ends up floating downstream until someone hauls him out by the rake. If there's a ferry, it's worse. The ferryman always charges too much. Always. Entire carts of belongings are traded for the privilege of standing, knee-deep in water, while the ferry lists alarmingly. More than once, a cart tips, spilling grain, weapons, and one particularly unlucky chicken into the river. And yet, somehow, everyone eventually makes it across. Wet, miserable, and short a few belongings, but alive, usually. Flat land you can handle. Mountains, however, are the devil's invention. Marching up a steep slope in full gear is agony. Your calves scream. Your lungs burn. Your boots slip on loose rocks. At one point, you're convinced your soul has left your body and is watching from above, shaking its head in disgust. The nobles, of course, ride comfortably on horses, looking down at the struggling masses as though climbing a mountain were as easy as climbing a ladder. Occasionally, one will offer encouragement. "Almost there," he shouts while sipping from a flask of wine. You briefly consider murder. Nights in the mountains are worse. Cold seeps into your bones. Fires smoke uselessly in the damp air. The wind howls through the valleys like a chorus of angry ghosts. You curl into your cloak, listening to Gerald snore, and wonder if this is what purgatory feels like. But the views, when the mist clears, are astonishing. Valleys stretch for miles, dotted with villages that look peaceful and warm compared to your freezing misery. The sunsets turn the peaks crimson. You take it all in for a moment, then trip over a rock and nearly tumble off a cliff. Every village you pass is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because food and water. A curse because they clearly despise you. Villagers eye you like you're a plague of rats with slightly better shoes. Children point and laugh at your rust-stained mail. Dogs bark incessantly. Chickens scatter in panic, only to be scooped up by hungry crusaders. Sometimes you're offered hospitality, a barn to sleep in, perhaps, or bread at a shocking price. But more often, you're told to move along, quickly. One innkeeper agrees to serve you ale, then accidentally waters it down until it tastes like a distant memory of barley. Another promises meat stew, then brings out a pot containing something that looks suspiciously like boiled cabbage with bones floating in it. The nobles, naturally, get better treatment. Local lords invite them into halls, pour wine, roast whole pigs. You, meanwhile, hit mud, scraps, and fleas. Gerald tries to sneak into one of these feasts once. He makes it as far as the doorway before tripping over his rake and knocking over a jug of wine worth more than your entire outfit. You both end up outside, chased off with curses and a broom. By now, you've passed through several regions where the locals don't speak your tongue. Communication is an art form, part charades, part shouting, part random pointing at things until someone gives up. You mime drinking to ask for ale. The innkeeper thinks you're asking for milk. You mime bread. He brings cheese. You mime cheese. He brings a goat. Eventually, you just eat the goat's cheese and call it a win. Misunderstandings abound. A knight once tries to purchase a horse, but accidentally insults the seller's grandmother. The argument nearly turns violent until both sides realize they've been debating two entirely different subjects. One about horses, the other about whether the grandmother is still alive. Gerald, oddly, seems immune to the language barrier. He speaks in a mixture of hand gestures, gibberish, and loud enthusiasm, and somehow everyone understands him. Or at least, they nod and hand him onions. You stop questioning it after the third time. The farther you march, the more tempers flare. Nobles squabble over leadership. Priests argue about whose prayers are holier. Peasants grumble about rations. Everyone complains about the smell. Small fights break out daily. A shove here, a punch there. Someone accuses someone else of stealing bread. Someone else insists their donkey was sabotaged. Gerald claims his rake was bent by jealous rivals. The leaders try to maintain order, but it's like herding cats, if cats were heavily armed, perpetually hungry, and smelled like swamp water. And yet, despite all the tension, the march continues. You keep moving eastward, step after miserable step, as though dragged forward by the sheer momentum of so many equally deluded souls. One evening, after weeks of endless trudging, rumors ripple through the camp. You're close to Constantinople, the great city, the jewel of the East. Larger, richer, grander than anything you've ever imagined. The thought alone keeps you moving, despite your aching feet and the fact that your boots are now more whole than leather. You fall asleep dreaming of golden domes, bustling markets, and baths. Actual baths, with water and soap, maybe even clean clothes. Of course, deep down, you know it won't be that simple. Nothing on this journey has been. But still, the idea of Constantinople is enough to make you hope again. And that's dangerous, because hope, you've learned, is just another way of setting yourself up for disappointment. You've been marching through Europe for what feels like years, though in reality, it's been weeks, maybe months. Time has lost all meaning. Days are measured in blisters, meals in the number of beans you managed to chew before giving up. And then, at last, the horizon breaks. There it is, Constantinople, the great city, bigger than any place you've ever seen, bigger than you thought places could even be. The first thing you notice is the walls. They're huge. Not just, oh, that's impressive, huge. Did God himself stack these rocks? Huge, miles of stone rising into the sky, topped with towers that make your village church look like a chicken coop. The second thing you notice is the domes. Golden, gleaming, catching the sun like giant heavenly helmets. Churches here don't just point toward God. They blind him on a sunny day. The third thing you notice is the smell. Not the usual crusader stew and sweat aroma, but spice, incense, and bread baking. The city smells alive. You nearly cry. Or maybe that's just the smoke from a brazier stinging your eyes. Gerald, of course, says something profound. Looks expensive. If you expected trumpets, cheering crowds, or even polite applause, you're disappointed. The citizens of Constantinople do not look thrilled to see you. In fact, they look terrified. To them, you are not noble warriors on a holy mission. You're thousands of dirty, half-starved, heavily armed strangers camping on their front lawn. Children gape at your rusted armor. Merchants slam shutters. Priests whisper and cross themselves. Dogs bark and then run away, presumably to warn other dogs. The guards on the walls stare down, crossbows in hand, waiting for the moment when you inevitably try to steal something shiny. Which, to be fair, is already happening. Gerald has spotted a decorative tile and is trying to pry it loose with his rake. Back home, people wear wool and leather, maybe a scrap of fur if they're wealthy. Here, the locals swan around in silk. Real silk, shimmering, flowing, probably worth more than your entire family farm. You spot a woman with earrings the size of walnuts and a man wearing a robe that looks like it's been woven from sunlight itself. The markets overflow with goods you've never seen before. Figs, spices, glass so clear, looks like frozen water, coins with strange faces stamped on them. A vendor waves a jar of honey at you and shouts something in Greek. You assume he's bussing you. In fact, he's probably telling you not to touch the merchandise. And the food, oh the food. Lamb roasted with herbs, flatbreads baked in stone ovens, bowls of olives glistening with oil. Compared to your diet of onions, peas, and despair, this is heaven. You drool openly. The locals notice. They do not look flattered. You don't speak Greek. They don't speak your language. Communication quickly becomes a disaster. You try to ask for bread. The baker thinks you want to buy his entire oven. You mind drinking water. The innkeeper hands you wine so strong, it removes the lining of your throat. You nod politely and cough for the next half hour. Gerald, however, once again thrives. He points at random things, waves his rake like a royal scepter, and somehow manages to return to camp each night with armfuls of figs, jugs of cheap wine, and at least one stolen hat. No one knows how. It doesn't take long to learn that the Byzantine Emperor, Alexios, a man with more titles than you have clean socks, isn't thrilled about the Crusade showing up uninvited. On one hand, he asked for help against the Turks. On the other, he didn't expect help to mean a mob of hungry, armed peasants tearing up his countryside. So he does what emperors do best, makes you swear oaths. You're herded into a grand hall, its walls glittering with mosaics and gold. You've never seen so much color in one place. While you're still staring at the ceiling like a dazzled sheep, A very official-looking man announces that you'll all be swearing loyalty to the Emperor. You're not entirely sure what that means, but everyone else is doing it, so you mumble something about loyalty and hope it counts. Gerald swears on his rake. Nobody corrects him. The Byzantines think you're barbarians, which, to be fair, you kind of are. You eat with your hands. You spit in the street. You bathe rarely, if at all. When offered a spoon, one crusader uses it as a miniature shovel. Another tries to wear it as jewelry. At one feast, a nobleman attempts to cut meat with his dagger. The Byzantines watch in horror as he saws away and wipes the blade on his sleeve. Later, a peasant dunks his entire head into a bowl of soup. The locals stop inviting you to dinners after that. You try to impress them with your martial skill, but this also goes poorly. During a display, Gerald charges at a practice dummy, trips on his own feet, and stabs himself in the boot. He declares victory anyway. The Byzantines politely clap, but their eyes say, "Dear Lord, we're doomed." The city is so rich, so beautiful, that some crusaders whisper about staying. Why march all the way to Jerusalem when Constantinople already looks like heaven? Gold, silk, spices, baths, for God's sake, all within reach. You could settle here, find work, maybe even open a stall selling slightly bent rakes. But you're reminded, again and again, that you're only guests, and not particularly welcome ones. The guards keep a close eye on you. The Emperor wants you to move along quickly, preferably before you eat the city into bankruptcy. So you sigh, strap your smelly armor back on, and prepare to leave. On the morning of departure, you look back at the city one last time. The golden domes gleam in the sunrise. The walls rise like mountains. For a brief moment, you think maybe this journey won't be so bad after all. Then your stomach growls. Gerald falls into a ditch. Someone sneezes loud enough to startle the horses. And you remember exactly what kind of crusade this is. As you march eastward, Constantinople shrinks behind you, disappearing into the haze. The promise of baths, bread, and civilization fades with it. Ahead lies Anatolia, dry, hot, and full of enemies. You sigh, adjust your blistered feet in your collapsing boots, and shuffle forward. Jerusalem feels no closer, but you're stuck now. And besides, how much worse could it get? You thought the hard part was getting to Constantinople. You were wrong. The Byzantines, eager to be rid of you before you devour their entire economy in bread and wine, ferry your army across the Bosporus. The water crossing is crowded, smelly, and full of donkeys that do not want to be on boats. But eventually, you land on the far shore. Welcome to Anatolia. It's hot, it's dry, and it's about to get much, much worse. The first thing you notice is the sun. Not the gentle, golden sun of your fields back home, but a brutal, hammering sun that seems to have a personal vendetta against your skin. Your wool tunic, already stiff with sweat and stew stains, instantly transforms into a portable oven. The second thing you notice is the ground. Gone are the muddy roads and grassy fields. Here, it's rocks, dust, and more rocks. Every step feels like an argument between your feet and God. Gerald, of course, claims he loves it. Dry heat's good for the bones, he says, before immediately tripping over a stone and scraping his elbow. You thought food was scarce before. Now, it's a miracle if you eat anything at all. The Byzantine guides had warned you. The land here isn't generous. Villages are small. Water is rare, and the locals have learned not to leave anything lying around when a crusading horde comes knocking. Breakfast is often non-existent. Lunch, if you're lucky, is a handful of dried figs or bread so hard it could double as a weapon. Dinner is, whatever someone manages to boil in a dented pot. One night, it's roots. Another night, it's something described only as meat adjacent. Gerald once triumphantly drags back a lizard. It ends up in the stew. You don't ask questions. Water is worse. Streams are few. Wells are jealously guarded, and every drop tastes suspicious. Your flask constantly runs dry. More than once, you see men lapping water straight from puddles, only to regret it later in ways too graphic to describe. The heat presses down like an anvil. Armor becomes unbearable, turning nights into slow-moving kettles. Peasants strip to shirts and regret it when their pale skin burns to a shade usually reserved for cooked lobsters. Dust rises with every step, coating your throat, clinging to your sweat, and turning your nose into a storage container for grit. By midday, your tongue feels like sandpaper. By evening, your entire body is covered in a thin, unpleasant crust. Gerald ties a rag over his mouth and declares it desert armor. He looks ridiculous, but you secretly wish you'd thought of it first. If villagers in Europe didn't like you, the Anatolian locals downright hate you. They vanish at the first sight of crusaders. Fields are empty, houses abandoned, wells poisoned or filled with rocks. Sometimes you see figures on distant ridges, watching silently before slipping away. When you do encounter people, it's tense. They glare, mutter in languages you don't understand, and clutch their belongings tightly. Some trade food at outrageous prices. Others simply slam doors. Once, your group stumbles into a village that seems deserted. Gerald celebrates, already planning which house he'll borrow a chair from. But as you push open a door, you realize the place isn't empty. It's a trap. Armed men spring from hiding, shouting war cries. You barely escape with your life. Gerald loses his rake for a day. He mourns as though a child has died. The real danger isn't just hunger or thirst. It's ambush. Small groups of mounted raiders begin shadowing your march. They're fast, well-armed, and know the land far better than you ever will. The first time they strike, it's chaos. Arrows rain down out of nowhere. Men scatter, shields raised, shouting in terror. Nobles bark orders, but no one listens. The raiders sweep in, snatch a few unlucky crusaders, and vanish before you can even react. You huddle with your group, clutching your dull sword, praying it won't be your turn. After that, paranoia sets in. Every hill, every patch of trees, every gust of wind seems like a prelude to another attack. Sleep becomes harder. Marching becomes tenser. Gerald tries to build a scarecrow out of spare tunics, claiming it will confuse the enemy. The scarecrow immediately collapses. Morale does not improve. As if hunger, thirst, and raiders weren't enough, sickness spreads like gossip. The heat festers wounds. Water spreads fevers. Men cough, vomit, or simply collapse mid-march. The priests insist on prayer. The healers insist on bleeding. Neither helps. One poor man gets sunstroke so badly, he begins shouting about angels. Everyone gathers, thinking it's a vision from God. Turns out he's just delirious. By morning, he's gone. You try not to think about it. You try not to think about anything, really, except the next step, the next sip of warm water, the next handful of questionable stew. The longer the march drags on, the more the crusaders turn on each other. Nobles argue about strategy. Priests argue about doctrine. Peasants argue about bread. One evening, Gerald nearly comes to blows with another man over a single onion. A single onion. They shout, wrestle, and roll in the dust until the onion bursts, scattering pieces into the dirt. Both men weep. Trust is thin. Supplies are thinner. Some crusaders vanish in the night, either deserting or being taken by raiders. No one is sure which. Everyone suspects everyone else. And yet, somehow, you keep going. Day after day, step after miserable step, the army crawls across Anatolia. You don't know how many miles you've walked. You don't know how much farther Jerusalem is. You only know that turning back is impossible, and standing still is death. At night, you lie under the stars, staring at constellations you don't recognize, your stomach aching and your skin caked in dust. You whisper prayers, half out of faith, half out of desperation. Gerald snores beside you, clutching his rake like a holy relic, and in the distance, you hear the faint howl of wolves. Or maybe men. Either way, you know tomorrow will bring more of the same. Hunger, heat, marching, fear. Welcome to the Crusade. You always imagined battle would be heroic. Trumpets blaring, banners waving, knights charging in shining armor. What you actually get is confusion, dust, and an overwhelming desire to run away very quickly. It happens at dawn. You're half asleep, chewing on a piece of bread that tastes like bark, when shouts erupt from the edge of camp. Arrows whistle overhead. Men scream. Horses rear. The enemy is upon you. Who exactly they are? You're not sure. Seljuk Turks, probably. All you know is that they're fast, organized, and very much not impressed by your ragtag crusader army. You scramble to your feet, fumbling for your sword. Gerald charges past you, waving his rake like a man possessed. You consider following him, then immediately reconsider when a horseman gallops past, nearly trampling you. Knights in heavy armor stumble, unable to keep up with the agile raiders. Archers loose arrows wildly, hitting more bush than enemies. Priests shout prayers that are drowned out by the clash of steel. You sit on a rock, shaking, while Gerald pokes at an abandoned helmet. Reckon I won? He asks proudly, holding up his bent rake. You don't answer. You're too busy realizing how unprepared you all are. The leaders argue. Some blame cowardice. Some blame poor planning. Some, inevitably, blame sign. The priests insist the defeat is punishment for gluttony, lust, or possibly someone forgetting to say grace. Everyone agrees on one thing. Morale is sinking faster than a stone in a well. You'd think this experience would teach caution. It does not. A week later, another group of raiders appears. Instead of preparing defenses, your leaders decide on a bold strategy. Charge them head-on. It goes about as well as you expect. The enemy simply retreats, luring the crusaders deeper into rough terrain. Then, once your side is exhausted and spread out, they counterattack. Knights get bogged down in hills. Infantry stumble. You personally trip over a rock and nearly knock out your front teeth. The whole army ends up fleeing back to camp, dragging wounded comrades and leaving behind dignity. Gerald insists the retreat was tactical. Nobody believes him. It's in the middle of one of these skirmishes that Gerald earns his questionable place in Crusader lore. Cornered by 3 enemy horsemen, he does the only thing that comes naturally. He screams, raises his rake, and charges. By sheer luck, his wild flailing spooks the horses, who rear back and scatter. Gerald, emboldened, chases them for a good 30 paces before realizing no one is following him. When he returns, panting and triumphant, he declares himself God's chosen rake knight. The story spreads through the camp like wildfire. Soon everyone's talking about Gerald's miraculous victory. Songs are half-jokingly composed. Someone even carves a tiny wooden rake as a charm. It's ridiculous. But in a grim, hungry march, it's also the first time anyone has laughed in weeks. The siege that shouldn't have been, and eventually, your leaders decide to go on the offensive. They march the army to a small fortified town, convinced it will be an easy victory. It is not. The town's walls are sturdier than expected. The defenders are well supplied. And your army, already half-starved and exhausted, has no real plan beyond shout loudly and hope God helps. You spend 3 miserable days camped outside the walls, building makeshift ladders from whatever wood you can find. When the ladders finally go up, they're too short. Crusaders climb halfway, then fall off, sometimes onto their own comrades. The defenders, meanwhile, rain down arrows, rocks, and insults. The rocks hurt more than the arrows. The insults hurt more than the rocks. After a week of embarrassment, the leaders quietly decide to move on. No one calls it a defeat. They just say the town wasn't worth it. With battles failing and supplies dwindling, hunger becomes unbearable. Meals shrink to scraps. Horses are slaughtered. Some men boil leather straps for soup. Others chew grass. One night, Gerald roasts a rat on a stick. You swear you'll never eat such a thing. 10 minutes later, you're asking for a bite. The constant gnawing in your stomach makes battle even harder. You march sluggishly, swing your sword weakly, and dream endlessly of bread. Glorious soft bread. It doesn't help that raiders know this. They attack when you're weakest, when your army is slow and unfocused. Each clash bleeds strength from the crusade. With every failure, tempers flare. Nobles accuse each other of incompetence. Priests accuse the army of sin. Common soldiers accuse everyone above them. One particularly fiery preacher claims the defeats are because of gambling, drinking, and certain unholy activities behind tents. He demands a public penance. Dozens of crusaders strip down and whip themselves in front of the camp, chanting prayers. The next battle goes no better. Afterward, Gerald mutters, "Could have just whipped the enemy instead?" No one laughs. The worst fight comes in the blistering midday sun. Raiders strike while you're marching through a valley, trapped on both sides by hills. Arrows rain down. Men panic. Horses bolt. The entire column devolves into chaos. You run, stumble, fight, run again. Sweat blinds you, dust chokes you, and all you can hear is screaming. At one point, you see Gerald wrestling with a horse. It bites him. He bites back. By evening, the Crusaders manage to regroup. The raiders are gone, but the cost is devastating. Hundreds dead, supplies stolen, morale shattered. Every so often, the Crusaders do win, usually by accident. Once, a group of raiders attacks the camp at night, only to stumble over guy ropes and crash into cooking fires. Startled Crusaders rush out, weapons swinging, and somehow chase them off. The victory is hailed as divine. Another time, a group of knights actually manages to catch the enemy in a narrow pass. The raiders, unable to maneuver, retreat in disarray. It's the first time you've seen genuine celebration in weeks. But the victories are small, fleeting, and costly. They do little to change the bigger truth. This crusade is bleeding to death one skirmish at a time. That night, sitting by a smoky fire, you realize something. The crusade isn't a glorious march of Christian might. It's a slow, grinding ordeal of hunger, fear, and endless mistakes. You stare at your chipped sword. You look at Gerald, who is proudly sharpening his rake as though it's Excalibur. You think about home, about fields and bread, and rivers that actually have water in them. And you wonder, not for the first time, if Jerusalem is really worth all this. But tomorrow, you'll march again, because turning back is impossible, and stopping means death. So you march. If you thought hunger was bad before, you were only nibbling at the edges of despair. Now you're in the full-course banquet of misery. It starts gradually. Meals shrink from bowls of stew to ladles of broth, then from ladles to spoons, then from spoons to smell the pot and pretend. By now, dinner is a pot of hot water with a single onion floating in it. Sometimes the onion is removed before serving, to be reused the next day. Gerald insists he once saw a carrot in the stew. You suspect it was a hallucination. Your ribs stick out. Your belt, once too tight, now dangles loose. The army moves slower, speaks less, and dreams constantly of food. At night, you lie awake imagining loaves of bread, wheels of cheese, rivers of ale. You'd give anything, absolutely anything, for a crust. Hunger forces innovation, and by innovation, you mean culinary crimes. Some men roast grasshoppers, others chew bark. Someone boils shoe leather into soup. Gerald presents you with a special stew one evening. You ask what's in it. He says, "Don't ask." You eat it anyway. It tastes faintly of pigeon, faintly of regret. One night, desperate beyond reason, roasts his warhorse. This causes outrage among other knights, who claim it's dishonorable. The next night, they join him at the fire. The priests declare such meals sinful. The soldiers declare the priests can starve if they like. With stomachs empty, paranoia grows fat. Rumors swirl through the camp. Someone is hoarding supplies. Someone is trading with the enemy. Someone is sneaking into villages at night and stealing bread. Accusations fly. Fights break out. A man is beaten for allegedly hiding a sausage. No sausage is found. One rumor claims the Byzantines tricked you, sending you into this wasteland to die. Another insists that eating certain desert plants will grant strength. Gerald tries it. He spends the night regretting it violently. At this point, truth doesn't matter. Distrust eats at the army more than hunger ever could. The nobles and priests aren't faring better, though they pretend otherwise. Some argue the army should split, searching for food in all directions. Others say you should march faster to reach richer lands. A few whisper about retreat. One particularly ambitious knight suggests raiding a nearby allied village for the greater good. His tent mysteriously burns down that night. In council, leaders shout more than they plan. Each has their own agenda, their own pride, their own desire to be the hero who leads the army to salvation. Meanwhile, the common soldiers, you included, wait for someone to decide whether you're eating tomorrow. Eventually, desperation wins. A raid is launched on a nearby settlement. You're told it's full of enemies. It turns out to be full of frightened farmers. The Crusaders strip it bare. Chickens are seized, grain stolen, wells drained. A few men try to resist. They are cut down. You're sickened, but you also eat for the first time in days. That night, you chew on roasted chicken and try not to think about the faces of the villagers. Gerald, however, declares it the best meal of the crusade. He licks his greasy fingers and thanks God for his bounty. Not everyone agrees with such methods. A group of knights condemns the raid, calling it dishonorable. Tensions boil. Soon swords are drawn, not against Turks, but against fellow crusaders. The clash is brief, but bloody. A dozen men die. The rest of the army watches in stunned silence, too hungry and too tired to intervene. Afterward, leaders declare unity is essential. Everyone nods. No one believes it. You realize the crusade no longer marches as one army. Its fragments held together by little more than hunger and habit. Amidst the chaos, opportunists emerge. A group of clever merchants begins selling food at outrageous prices. A crust of bread for a silver coin, a scrap of dried meat for 2. They claim the food is from God. More likely, it's from hidden stores. Men sell weapons, armor, even heirlooms just to eat. One poor soul trades his boots for a loaf. He regrets it the next day, marching barefoot across rocks. You, too, part with precious things, a small knife, a keepsake from home. In exchange, you get half a cheese. It lasts one glorious afternoon. Gerald, unwilling to trade, tries to start his own business selling fresh air. It does not succeed. The darker the nights, the darker the rumors. You hear whispers of men disappearing, of graves dug up, of meat that looks suspiciously unlike chicken. You don't want to believe it. You pray it isn't true. But the gnawing in your own stomach makes you understand how such horrors could happen. Just as despair feels absolute, a small miracle occurs. No one cares. The food is devoured in hours. Bellies fill, spirits lift, songs rise once more. You taste wine for the first time in weeks. It's sour, probably watered down, but it might as well be nectar of the gods. For one night, the crusade feels almost human again. Laughter echoes, fires blaze, and Gerald sings a song about his rake that makes absolutely no sense. But as everyone clapping by morning, the food is gone. The hunger returns. The march continues. But something has shifted. The army knows it can't go on like this. Every skirmish, every betrayal, every desperate meal chips away at what little unity remains. You march with a hollow stomach and a hollow heart, wondering how many will live to see Jerusalem, and whether, even if you do, you'll recognize yourself when you arrive. The crusade, once painted as a shining pilgrimage of faith, now feels more like a long, slow collapse. And yet, you keep going. Because what else is there to do? After months that felt like decades, after blisters that deserved their own parish, after lice colonies that could apply for citizenship, you finally see it. Jerusalem. At first, you don't believe it. The city rises on the horizon, sun glinting off its walls, domes gleaming faintly in the distance. For a moment, you almost weep. All those sermons, all those promises, all those nights sleeping next to Gerald while he whispered sweet nothings to his rake. This is what it was for. But as you get closer, reality sets in. Jerusalem is not waiting with open arms. It is waiting with locked gates, high walls, and defenders who are very much uninterested in letting thousands of smelly strangers inside. The leaders gather and declare that the siege of Jerusalem will be glorious. You immediately know this means it will be long, bloody, and possibly stupid. The first order of business is to camp, which means picking a nice patch of land, pitching tents, and immediately running out of firewood and clean water. The second order of business is to build siege engines, which sounds exciting until you realize you've got no wood, no carpenters, and only one man who claims to have seen a catapult once in a dream. So you improvise. Wagons are dismantled. Doors are ripped off. Even Gerald's beloved rake is considered for construction material. He guards it with his life. Eventually, something resembling a siege tower takes shape. It creaks, wobbles, and looks like it could collapse if someone sneezes too hard. Still, the leaders nod proudly. Life in a siege camp is everything you hated about marching, concentrated and intensified. Food is scarce. Water is worse. Disease spreads like gossip in a convent. At least before, you were moving. Now you're stuck in one place, stewing in your own filth and boredom. The sun beats down mercilessly. Armor becomes an oven. Helmets feel like punishment. Men collapse from heat stroke daily. At night, the air cools, but the problems don't. Rats scurry through the camp. Lice flourish. Mosquitoes feast. You scratch yourself raw and wonder if holiness can be achieved simply by surviving the itching. The smell, oh, the smell. Thousands of unwashed crusaders packed together, latrines overflowing, garbage heaps festering. If the defenders don't surrender, it will be because they're waiting for you to suffocate in your own stench. With limited resources, creativity blooms. Some men hurl rocks with slings. Others throw pots filled with whatever unpleasant sludge they can find. Gerald invents a weapon he calls God's Surprise. A bucket filled with manure, set on fire, and flung at the walls. It surprises no one more than Gerald when it explodes prematurely. Archers do their best, loosing arrows that rarely hit anything, but occasionally startle a pigeon. The defenders, by contrast, rain down actual rocks, boiling oil, and sharp objects with professional precision. You develop a deep respect for gravity. As days turn into weeks, morale crumbles. Knights argue about strategy. Priests argue about theology. Common soldiers argue about who stole whose onion. Some men desert, sneaking away at night. Others start preaching doomsday sermons, declaring the crusade cursed. Gerald insists this is all part of God's fitness program. No one appreciates the joke. At one point, a heated argument breaks out over whether God prefers boiling water or boiling oil for sieges. The discussion escalates into a fistfight. Desperation leads to one of the strangest moments of the entire crusade. The leaders order a barefoot procession around the city walls, in full view of the defenders, while singing hymns and carrying relics. It's supposed to demonstrate divine favor. In reality, it demonstrates that thousands of starving, sunburned, half-naked crusaders can walk in circles very slowly while locals on the walls laugh at them. Still, spirits lift briefly. You even feel a flicker of hope until you trip in a thorn bush halfway through the procession. Somehow, miraculously, help arrives. A group of Genoese sailors manages to haul wood and supplies overland. Suddenly, the Crusaders have real materials to build proper siege towers and battering rams. Work begins at once. Men saw, hammer, and sweat under the blistering sun. You're roped into hauling timbers that weigh as much as a small cottage. By the end of the day, you can't feel your arms. But slowly, the machines of war take shape. Real siege towers, sturdy rams, proper ladders. For the first time, you look at the walls of Jerusalem and think, maybe this madness might actually work. The day comes. Trumpets blare. Priests bless the army. Everyone pretends to be brave. The siege towers roll forward, creaking, groaning, swaying dangerously. Defenders unleash arrows and stones, but the towers keep advancing. You, unlucky as ever, are assigned to push one of the rams. It's heavy, hot, and terrifying. Rocks crash down around you. A man beside you is crushed. You keep going, mostly because stopping means dying faster. Then, with a thunderous crack, the ram slams into the gates. Again and again. Wood splinters. Dust fills the air. Meanwhile, ladders rise against the walls. Men scramble up, shouting prayers and curses. Some fall. Some make it to the top. It's chaos. Screaming, clashing steel, smoke, fire. You're shoved forward, blade in hand, heart hammering. For all your months of misery, this is the first time you've actually fought in a battle. By some cruel miracle, the walls are breached. Crusaders pour into the city. The defenders fall back. Gates swing open. You stumble inside Jerusalem. The streets echo with chaos. Shouts, clangs, cries. Houses burn. Smoke curls upward. And then the blood begins. What happens next is something you'll never forget and never truly understand. The Crusaders, driven by months of hunger, rage, and desperation, unleash fury upon the city. Soldiers cut down defenders, but also civilians. Homes are looted. Families torn apart. Blood pools in the streets. The priests had promised salvation, forgiveness, eternal glory. Instead, you witness madness, horror, and grief. You stagger through the carnage, sword trembling in your hand. You don't even remember striking anyone. The noise is overwhelming. The air reeks of smoke, sweat, and iron. At one point, Gerald, face smeared with soot, shouts, "We did it." You want to ask him what exactly it is, because victory feels disturbingly like hell. By the next morning, Jerusalem is silent. The city has fallen. The Crusaders have won. But as you wander the streets, stepping over broken weapons, shattered doors, and worse, you wonder what winning means. Yes, the crusade reached its goal. Yes, Jerusalem is in your hands. But the cost, the hunger, the disease, the betrayal, the rivers of blood, it all hangs heavy on your soul. You kneel in the Holy Sepulchre, as many crusaders do, praying for forgiveness. You're not sure if you're praying for sins past, present, or future. Maybe all of them. And deep down, you wonder if God is listening, or if he turned away the moment the gates fell. The walls of Jerusalem stand conquered. The banners of the Crusaders flutter. The city is yours, or at least what's left of it. And yet, victory feels hollow. You awake in a tent that reeks of sweat, smoke, and something that may be spoiled meat. You are sore in places you didn't know existed, sunburned, dusty, and somehow still alive. Around you, your fellow crusaders nurse wounds, both physical and mental. Some are laughing, some are crying. Most are simply silent, staring into the distance with a kind of hollow defeat. You realize the siege and battles have changed everyone. Few are the same as when they left home. Some have grown cruel, some bitter, some deliriously insane. Gerald, of course, is unchanged. He still hugs his rake. You try to remember why you came. Eternal glory? Forgiveness? Adventure? All of it seems distant now, like a dream half remembered, slipping further with each groan of your aching body. The city is in ruins. Streets are littered with debris, broken weapons, and the occasional unlucky animal. Houses burned, gardens trampled, wells contaminated. The Crusaders, triumphant but exhausted, claim victory. You're too tired to argue. You trudge through the streets, avoiding puddles of questionable origin, and marvel at how easily human plans can go awry. Food is still scarce. Disease still lurks. But now there's also guilt, shame, and the knowledge that no sermon will ever erase what was done here. You witness knights arguing over treasure, priests declaring who is sinless enough to enter holy sites first, and common soldiers scavenging scraps from ruined kitchens. Gerald's continued heroics. Of course, Gerald has a plan. He has claimed a small corner of a ruined bakery as his personal domain and insists on patrolling it with his rake. Defending the holy dough, he says proudly. You are unsure if he's joking. You are also too exhausted to care. You wander to the top of one of the city walls. Below, the city sprawls in disarray. The streets are filled with smoke and shadows. The smell of fire and blood is everywhere. You think of home. Your village, your family, the fields you once plowed. You think of barley and onions, and that one summer when nothing terrible happened for a whole week. You think of soap. Oh, how you think of soap. You wonder what God thinks of all this. You wonder if eternal glory tastes like dust and blood, or if the Pope perhaps exaggerates. And then, for a brief moment, you feel relief simply in being alive. Eventually, the leaders talk of returning home. Some are eager. Some are too broken to move. Some will never return. The journey back promises more of the same. Long roads, scarce food, disease, and the occasional aggressive donkey. You wonder if home will feel familiar, or if the months of marching and fighting have reshaped everything. You pack what little you can carry, adjusting your tunic and boots that have long since ceased to protect your feet. Gerald insists on taking the rake. You do not question it. As the army sets out, you reflect on what you've learned. War is nothing like the stories. Glory is expensive, bloody, and fleeting. Hunger, heat, and blisters are consistent teachers. Friends can become enemies. Enemies can become friends, and rats will always outlast humans in any siege. You've survived disease, chaos, starvation, and more than one battle that should have killed you. And somehow, against all odds, you have endured. You walk, step after weary step, away from Jerusalem, toward home. The city fades in the distance, smoke curling like a reminder. The sun beats down, hot as ever. The dust clings. The blisters throb. And you march on, a little wiser, a little wearier, but still remarkably alive. The crusade promised adventure, glory, and eternal reward. What it delivered was dust, blood, hunger, disease, blisters, and a lifetime supply of stories you'll never forget. But perhaps that is enough. Perhaps survival itself is victory. Perhaps, after all, there is some holiness in enduring. You glance at Gerald, still clutching his rake. He smiles. You shake your head, laugh quietly, and keep walking. And somewhere, far ahead, your village waits. A place of barley, onions, soap, and the faintest hope that life can return to normal.